Welcome, everyone. My name is Ivan Bernal. I'm the Director of Architecture and Urban Design here at Kent State College of Architecture and Environmental Design. Welcome again to this week's episode of Faculty and Friends, where we have asked one of our very dear faculties, Tina Patel, to invite someone that she can relate in her endeavors as a researcher, scholar, academic, but in particular, how this applies to the professional practice of interior design. Tina Patel is an assistant professor here in the interior design program in the College of Architecture and Environmental Design at Kent State University. She received her Bachelor's of Architecture from Indiana and her MA and MFA in interior design from Iowa State University. She has held academic positions of professor at Algonquin College, Ottawa, teaching specialist in interior design at University of Minnesota, instructor and coordinator of interior design programs at South Dakota State University, and prior to teaching, Tina worked at Callison RTKL, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore office SBPA Architects, West Des Moines, and Solomon Caldwell One Chicago. Her current work examines the intersection of people, processes, and the built environment, and she has presented at national and international conference and has published her research on learning and environments for neurodiversity and underrepresented groups, impacts of evolving workplaces on behavior and the design of pedagogy. Tina has established partnership with community leaders, nonprofit, and design practices dedicated to empowering communities in an attempt to expand on teaching methodologies centered on community engagement. Her community engaged pedagogy aims to sharpen students' understanding of others with different realities and unfamiliar experiences by utilizing current and ongoing social and economic issues affecting our community. Welcome, Tina. So
Thank you.
I also wanna mention that Tina has invited Milagros Zingoni. Milagros is joining us tonight, and she would engage in this conversation with Tina. But I also want to introduce Brendan Ho. Brendan Ho is going to be moderating this conversation. Brendan Ho is a professor here teaching second year studios and representation classes in the architecture program.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Yvonne. So again, I'm super excited as always for this another fantastic faculty and friends. I just want to encourage everyone again, if you guys have questions at the end after the conversation part, please feel free to ask them in the chat. You can direct message me here on Zoom, or you can post them into the YouTube, and I'll do my best to relay those at the end. And thank you guys again. I'm really excited for this talk, and I'm going to hand this off to Tina now.
Okay, can I share my screen?
Yes, feel free.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ivan, for this introduction and for creating this platform and approaching Milagros and me to participate. Thank you, Brandon, for moderating this session. And thank you to our Dean, Mark Mistur, for making these opportunities possible within our college. So I'm very excited to introduce Milagros Zingoni, Associate Professor at the Design School at Arizona State University, and now a friend. She has a bachelor's degree in habitat design and architecture and MArch from Argentina and master's in urban design and environmental planning from Arizona State University. Her research includes exploration of environmental and experiential setting that addresses new ways of learning and how these settings emphasize problem-solving skills and collaboration that creates communities of learning. She was recognized in 2019 by IDEC with National Teaching Excellence Award, by AIA Arizona chapter with the honor of 2019 Educators Year Award, by Annual Design Intelligence ranking as one of the top 12 most admired educators in the country, and by Arizona State University 2020 Outstanding Faculty Mentor Award. Milagros is a strong advocate for community causes, serving on multiple nonprofit and civic boards. She believes that innovation comes from communication between disciplines and collaboration between the community and the professionals with perhaps different background but similar goals. Her experience as designer and educator provides fresh lens to understand student-centered approaches physically and pedagogically. Both Milagros and I share common vision. We see our studios as a place to engage with difficult situation of differences and social inequalities, and for our students to meet with, listen to, and work with communities to make their voices heard. Her studios focus on community and commitment to public engagement through participatory design built collaboration. Sneaky and following Milagros' work over the years, I strongly believe that she inspires her students to become change agents, to go out and engage with communities in a way that is self critical, self reflecting, and humble, which I every day aspire to do as a researcher as well as educator. And I have a lot to learn from you and from your work, Milagros. So thank you for being here with us today. Your work has definitely inspired me, and I'm pretty sure it'll leave an impact on others today. I'm excited for this opportunity to engage in a dialogue with you this evening.
Thank you, Tina, to you and to Ivan and Mark. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, so with that said, and keeping everybody on time, I'll present why I leverage my studios to engage with the communities and how I implemented it, and then I'll hand it over to Milagros. So my first experience with community was when I worked on an adaptive reuse project for an opera house in a very small town in rural Iowa. Proposing how retailing should work and would work, it was great to be immersed and hear voices of the community who was so engaged in restoring this beautiful jewel. And then this research on retailing consumer behavior translated as I was a part of the design team at RTKL, creating vision for these malls, and eventually researching the impact of evolving workplace on employees' performativity and behavioral outcome, and strategizing and designing workplace interiors. This research and knowledge translated as I was framing design issues for my studios, focusing on workplace, retail, and restaurant designs. One day, I was being asked to teach design thinking and undergraduate research methods course where students had to investigate ambiguity, complexity, and uncertainty of social issues and raise the question embedded in these issues to be explored through design. I invited educators and activists within the discipline to learn about these issues. And this class grew over the years, and I held certain workshops inviting social responsibility leaders from Perkinsonville, HOK, Gensler, and small practices in Minnesota. And just to be clear, I taught this class in Minnesota. One thing with all these discussions which stuck with me is how designers or design profession is just serving 10% of the population, and our impact needs to be felt much more. So in my own personal life, I encountered neurodiversity. This is my child when she was 4, ready to go to her special education class on left. My nephew, whom you see in the middle with my father, who's on a spectrum and high end of the spectrum. And then one of the teachers from an alternative elementary program in Ottawa approached me and my colleague to help design a classroom for her students. And she was very insistent that this classroom needs to be designed with her students who come from diverse cultural and economic background and may be experiencing some limitation and challenges. This was with a partner, and I think she is right here somewhere in the chat, Pallavi, and I'll give her all the credit because I left for Kent and she took over this whole project for me while I was literally writing the research format and research outline. So their curriculum is very student driven, led by the community, parents, led by the students, I would say, and the community, parents, and teachers are very well involved. As I mentioned, the teacher was very insistent that every student's voice be heard. So we took, I should say, Pallavi took the students on an observatory walk. She actually helped the students draw spaces on the, in one of their outdoor spaces for them to realize what space means and what space should be, and introduce some 3D software programs to help them again, conceptualize the space. And then we worked together and she introduced a lot of drawings for them to understand what kind of spaces they want in this classroom. So based on the response which we got from this, basically, we try to create schematics for this classroom, which is a simple peg wall on a sliding system to provide different type of learning environments, collaboration environments, and showcasing areas as well as quiet environments, which these kids said they would like to have. Oops. So as I was going through these projects as well as that research, I questioned how I can create an avenue to bring the stories of the communities to the studios more effectively, the one I personally experienced in Greenfield, Iowa. It started here in Kent when I taught the senior thesis studio rooted in community engagement. The main purpose of this studio was to establish a foundation for interior design intervention, engaging in its impact on an urban scale. What drew my attention was the North Water Street, which was transformed just for a day in fall of 2018 to showcase its potential. With the support of the Kent community, who was not convinced first, as well as the city of Kent and the local businesses, the students were educated about the rich history of these abandoned buildings on the North Water Street and were made aware of the feasibility studies which were done actually for the economic and urban renewal of this part of the town. The students in participation with the City of Kent provided a unique vision for these buildings. Here you see the mills, which we probably living in Kent see it every day. And the student proposed a restaurant in the basement, a mercantile area. And then of course, one of the students was proposing how we can revive the music culture in Kent. And no project is ever complete, as I say, without a seasonal restaurant and a brewery. So this student basically proposed this. Though these projects increase students' awareness of their surrounding and knowledge of issues impacting the community, however, it lacked the engagement with their users, and I mean diverse users in an active way, where the students can abandon the stability of their worldview to align viewpoints with that of their end users. And I really wanted people to talk about their stories to me. I would like to collect these stories and employ these to inform my pedagogical approaches. Um, with that said, I also wanted the students to listen to these stories in an empathetical way, to understand them, and then to imagine and negotiate to provide the best solution through a participatory process. As thinking tools, I wanted to embed active listening sessions, reading, some heuristic studies to reflect upon self, and willingness to part away from self to encounter the other. So this was an interesting project, which I was approached by Beth Humbert, which you see over here on left. And she has a daughter who has a Down syndrome, and she's actually ready to graduate from high school this year. Beth wanted to open, or she still has an aspiration to open, learning resource facility for individuals with intellectual and developmental disability, and a cafe where they can be employed. The students were challenged to design a prototype for these facilities. The students were made aware of ASD, IDD, Down syndrome through guest speakers from the Center of Innovation in Transition and Employment here at Kent for people with disabilities, through the client, through the architect from Canton who's involved in this project. I actually did my research and I found out that there is a cafe in Chagrin Falls and it's run by a mother whose son has a Down syndrome. So they co-own it and they co-run it. And I reached out to her and she brought her son to interact with all the students here. I also embedded empathy exercise to understand disabilities, sketching the day in life for somebody with disabilities, and reviewing the plans and spaces through the perspective of these users. The students were encouraged constantly to reflect on the information gathered and to reframe the design challenges with insightful deliberation rather than accepting any given condition. So in this process, I was particularly impressed with their design responses, accommodating sensory needs of these youth, starting the work basically like, as you see in this particular example, they created these slat walls on a pivot system, which can basically, they can turn in and out and they can slide in and out. And what it does is it essentially like, creates a privacy when, the youth with disabilities are working and they need privacy. If they're distracted too much through the ambient cues, they can basically shut down the system. This particular group actually, they understood really well the schedule, the regime of the users, and they deliberately compartmentalized the sensory as well as the sensory space and the training space to make those accommodations. So for the next project, last summer, I watched a documentary, which is inside Akron's tent city, and it left a deep impact on me. So for the next project, it was like, perfect timing that the IDEC competition, which focused on homelessness and a place of hygiene for homeless, just came out. And I was watching this documentary. So I'm like, this is a perfect pairing. So what we did was we watched like in the class, the documentary together, invited the director of Northeast Ohio Coalition for Homeless and Jill Pable to make the students aware of policies, issues around homelessness and all the discrimination associated with it. I embedded again studies like empathy map, reading of Shaprio's poems, and the students had to like imagine if they were spending a night on the park bench or an empty parking lot, and form narratives as well as collage. Again, in their design responses, the students provided design solutions, which they were really sensitive to the privacy of homelessness, and they really provided a design solution which respected the dignity of these users. So I would like to thank Stacy for introducing me to this book, which again has left a deep impact on me. And in the wake of recent protests, again, racial, social, and economic injustices, and in recognition of profound spatial consequences of practices like segregation, redlining, gentrification, I thought it is very important for me to introduce these issues in my studio to the students. We found a partner in Chicago, YWCA, and thanks to Mark for making the travel possible last year for the students. So YWCA, after serving the Woodlawn community in Chicago for years, what they wanted to do is they want to create a long-term plan for the economic development of this area. The plan is called Blueprint for Equity, and the goal of this plan is to transform the Woodlawn area, starting with what would be the catalytic anchors, which you see over here, the 4 catalytic anchors at the corner of 63rd and Cottage Grove. These anchors will start a thriving economic corridor along Cottage Grove, creating jobs and providing opportunities for small businesses. The students were charged to design a food hall for one of these anchor business, which is like the old bank building, which will be completely gutted down, and a new building will come in its place. And the students were challenged to design or provide a vision for the food hall. So last year we took the students to Chicago, and they actually traveled through this diverse landscape. So we initially took them to North Loop, and we visited like the food halls over there, and then we went to the site to south side of Chicago, and it was just like a contrast which they witnessed here, and also like how North Loop had like so many food halls, restaurants at every corner. This was only one of the places to eat there in Chicago. These were some of the other photographs documented, and they were really like engaged in a dialogue with the community members, with YWCA during that visit. So with this, they become really sensitive to all the issues of segregation, redlining, etc. And with their design solutions, the students were not only provided just like vendors and seating for this food hall, but they were able to answer bigger question: how does this food hall contribute to the character of the place? How can your design help define the memory of the place? And how can this space become a part of the community to revive as addressed in this project? So this last one, I was really impressed with the student, Valerie, and her design response to give a control and ownership back to the community rather than displacing as a part of gentrification. So she was able to create this social space rather than just placing her vendors and seating in the center. This flexible social space will be externalized and materialized through the action of the community. And the way they will interact with the space is like, they can come here, they can have a local market, performance space, and they can even come and socialize here. Though the current cohort was not able to travel because of our travel restriction, we are still able to integrate this project through a virtual engagement. And I'm really excited to see their design solution as they present next week. Um, Again, like, with all the protests going on and the brutality, learning more about Cleveland community and Tamir Rice. We've recently partnered with Tamir Rice Foundation, and Miss Rice and RPMI Architects are going to come and present a book for our new project, which basically focuses on cultural arts centers, something similar which Ms. Rice has done in the memory of Tamir Rice. And the students will be very soon working for a cultural arts center for youth at risk. So with that said, this has been my humble attempt through passive and active participation with the community partners so far to create an awareness of existing social issues and embed studies and diverse voices to promote an empathetic engagement. Milagros wrote how we should foster our students to think beyond aesthetics and think empathetically first. She has, as she has and is providing in my conversations with her students, with a model of active participatory discourse by engaging with the communities in design build project. I have so much to learn from her infectious energy and the passion she holds for this work. But before I give it to Milagros, I want to really thank all my colleagues here at Kent State, at University of Minnesota, and all my partners, because all these projects are never ever possible without these partners. And also especially Ron and Killian for their support and listening to me and to my these crazy ideas and providing valuable feedback. And this presentation is really dedicated to my students because that's what I was essentially doing, is providing platform and presenting their work. So thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Again, I am excited and honored to share the work that I have been doing with my students for the last couple of years. I'm going to share now my screen with all of you. We practiced this before, so bear with me a second. I think that I will do this. Can you see the screen now?
No, it's not up yet.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes? Perfect. Well, thank you again. Tina touched a little bit about this. We live in an unprecedented times. It seems that if we disagree, we are against each other. We have seen social inequalities across the world and issues of climate change affecting all of us. Moreover, while the technology of these little devices that we all have made us better connected globally, we are seeing over and over that we are disconnected with the person that we have next to us. And COVID-19 just made all these problems even worse. So for me, it's this presentation is about my why. It's looking at the golden circle of Simon Sinek's. We all know what we do and how we do it very well, and very often it's the why, the one that we need to revise. I will share with you why I teach participatory design, why to me empathy is very important, and why introducing design build projects into interior design education. And we can all agree that for the last 10,000 years, humanity has been evolving fairly well. Yet the way that we continue to educate and teach and learn, it hasn't evolved in the last 200 years. So for me, design and learning design is about the experience of the human that we are designing for, but it's also the understanding of this person that we are designing for. If I were to ask any of you to think about a chair, more or less you would think about an object similar to the one that you have in the left, right? A place to put your butt, it has legs, it has a back. But what if I were to tell you that
Milagros,
the piece of fabric,
sorry,
yes?
I'll interrupt. You mentioned about the chair, and I don't think so we see that on your screen, so.
You don't?
No.
None of them?
You were showing the image. Okay, now, yes, now it's moving.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So just in case you needed to see, we went from there to this golden circle to what the presentation is going to be about, how we have evolved, becoming obsolete education, right? This kind of mass production of students. And this is the chair and the fabric. It was just to give you time to think about the chair, right? So what if I were to tell you that piece of fabric around the native from Paraguay is his chair? In order to understand that, you need to understand him first, right? He's nomadic. He moves from one season to the other one. And probably he wouldn't be able to afford our chair or carry our chair. So the moment that we understand him, it makes sense that that piece of fabric around the Indian of Paraguay is his chair. Because at the end of the day, the minimum essence of a chair is to have the body in a comfortable position. So understanding the essence of what we need to design allow us to provide the best solution for the person that we are designing for. So I shaped this presentation mainly to try to inspire the students. The first couple of years since I finished my architectural degree and I became an architect license, I have a couple of crises. The first one was how little prepared my school gave me knowledge on joinery, details, and budget. The second one was reconciling multiple perspectives. I was designing a public hospital in Argentina that by zip code would be the hospital that the president of the country would go if she or he get ill. So how do you design a hospital that needs to have a presidential suite, yet it's for people that cannot afford private health? Then I started studying urban planning, and I was going to these citizen participation meetings, and I realized that everyone who was going from the community to give their point of view were people over 60 who didn't have to work 2 shifts, that they didn't have to worry about cooking or taking care of their kids or their homework. And I really started questioning if we were really listening to everyone in the community. And when I started teaching, I kind of got back to one of my first crises that was about the lack of gender inequality and race in architecture. I have to clarify that my first 9 years I taught in architecture and urban design, and I moved to interiors 6 years ago. So one of my favorite books is Donna Shawn, The Reflective Practitioner. And I kind of took all these crises, right, as a way of reflecting about myself and what I could do to change them. So how I put these first couple of crises into actions and critical thinking was trying to make design education available to everyone. And when I say making it accessible, I'm not only talking about accepting more students and better diversity. I was talking about removing the walls of our school. We usually have the reviews kind of introverted our own rooms. And I really took it to the public realm, to the street. So 2007, I was teaching the freshman class studio with 500 students. And instead of having all of them occupying the entire building, each of them had to design their own bucket with cement to put their post. And we populated the entire mall on campus with 500 projects that we were educating the public about design. But I also developed a pedagogy that is called Design Primer, that it was a summer camp for high school students and underrepresented minorities to expose them to the 5 design disciplines. And here you have a couple of examples. The one in the middle is the Design Primer with the high school kids. The other ones were my 500 freshmen taking over the university mall. But I also started to create exhibits in the middle of nowhere with the communities that we were working on, from city halls to an empty piece of land and everything in between. As I mentioned before, one of the things that I developed was this pedagogy that is called EDIT, in which the first phase is engaging a community, then we design with the hope that we will be impacting the community to transform it after we leave. So this example is very close to my heart. We partner with the national rowing team. We went with the students to Connecticut, live with the Olympians for a week, that it helped us understand a day in their life, how often they eat. They are on a 9,000 calorie, how much they train. But also I took my students rowing to understand the discomfort of being barefoot and putting the boat in the river, and the understanding of collaboration and communication while we were practicing a sport. I continue developing this engagement. My next partners were 3 to 5 year old kids. We were asked to design a playground for their childcare facilities, and we interview them. You can see these are their drawings. We have to then translate their drawings. We observe them, and from that, and we were given, there was only money for screws, so the materials were all donated, and the materials were donated before we could design. So we were designing with what we had, and this is the first formal design build that we did for this childcare. This project is also close to my heart. My students always say, oh, all your projects are close to your heart. And in some way, when there is transformation, they become. This is a town that is 40 minutes away from the university, yet it doesn't have public lighting or trash collection system. It's a community that 92% of the people came illegally, and therefore they have fear to request basic public services. And we worked with them, and what is fascinating is that when we first started, the first thing that we did was to organize a community cleanup. We removed 180 tons of trash. If you come back today, they bought into what we propose. They bought 3 pieces of land. They are developing right now a park for the community. And I also started to partner with other schools. So in this particular case, it was for the Freedom by Design project that is part of the AIA. There is a program that technically students are supposed to liberate communities through design. Level 1 is changing the doorknobs of the doors for people with arthritis, for door handles. And because we are overachievers, we went with the first ADA planter in the state of Arizona, and we partnered with an adult school of masonry to together build these planters. And then I started teaching in interior design. And at some point I lost it at the very beginning because I was surprised that most of my students wanted to do interior design because they wanted to have an HGTV program. And I saw the lack of opportunity for them to really look at the discipline beyond aesthetics. Aesthetics is only one component, but it's also the responsibility of addressing the human body and the human mind. And another thing that ended lost in it, for me, I was doing design builds in architecture, was that the literature review indicated that students in interior design don't do design builds because they are women, and women don't use power tools. And you can tell by my hair that I really lost it. So the first time, the first project that I attempted to do was a project called Design, Make, Gift, a Dream. I partnered with the Phoenix Children's Hospital, working with long-term care patients. We will receive the dream of the kid, the name and the age, and the students will have to design a dream that we will give it to them. This one is close to my heart because it's the only patient that passed away while we was doing this. Through the years, we did over 120 dreams. And again, going back to this notion of edit studios, I wanted to start doing them in interiors because I saw that it has so many other components than just the joinery and the budget. And it was aligned to what employers are seeking, right? Yes, you need to know CAD, Revit, and all the technical things, but employers are also looking at good human beings that they can take risks, that they are reliable, that they can communicate with others, they can collaborate with others. And to me, design build studios is a practice where the theory and the practice intersects, right? It's very well established in architecture, but as I mentioned, in interior design, most of the time is addressed as build to learn pedagogy that is just making bigger models. To me, collaboration was something that was also very important. There is a lot of research in collaboration between designers and other disciplines like design and nursing, design and business, as a way of proving that how it improves creativity and improves the empathic response. So I went back to my chair and I added a different type of seating to my chair. And it was about looking at how we can work together to create something that is stronger, right? It's this weaving that one particular straw is very weak, but when we weave them together, it becomes something that can resist the weight of our body. And here I was in 2017, the first design building interiors. I work with 7 students in interior architecture, 1 student from architecture, 3 from music, and 75 kids from a Title I school. We started the collaboration with the kids through play as a way to equalize any kind of seniority between the perception of college students and 6th graders, but also the perception between me or their teachers and the youth. And we did a series of exercises with them through prototyping, writing. You can see here one of my students showing them in fabrication. We continue every week. They would see how their ideas and the project was evolving. And from that inspiration, working with them, this quote came from one of the students, that they all realized that they were all unique. It was a very diverse school. Title I schools are the schools that 75% of the kids qualify for free or reduced lunch. But they realized that they were stronger together. So we started exploring origami as a way to explore this concept. And this is the final project for this particular example. that it was for the first prototyping festival in the city of Mesa. The installation was so light, it was ranked #1 by the NEA report. This grant came from the NEA, but also a local museum invited us to have the installation there for the following 4 months. And my students were asked to seek not only at the design of this installation, but also how do we communicate during the festival and keep asking questions to the people that were visiting the installation. And it's something that it becomes very recurrent. But Gina asked me to talk about this project in particularly because she saw it and she liked it. So this is another example where probably is my biggest monster of all, because if you look at what I do, it has the engagement, the community participation, it has the design build, right? It has many different layers of complexity. This one, we partner with 125 kids from a Title I school from 5 different classes. And we have master students in interior architecture and junior students in industrial design. As I mentioned, it was vertical. We have graduate and undergraduate students. It was cross-disciplinary because we were working to design disciplines together, and it was a design build studio. So how I organize this type of studios is that the first 4 weeks is all community engagement. Then we have 4 weeks to design and then 4 weeks to fabricate. I call them a semester in steroids, but the results at the end, the students are all happy. And in order to make it work, one of the things that I realized through the years doing this is to make accountable every single one of my students. So they all have jobs that they chose to do that represents some part of the project. The first day of class, the first thing that we do is we move furniture around because we need to work in smaller groups, but also all together. So everyone is kind of reading their syllabus and we're like moving all the furniture, but it talks about this thing of how we communicate and how we collaborate together. And again, we start our engagement with the community by playing with them the first time. This first visit to the school is all done or curated by me, that it's following a book that is called Community Engagement for Youth and Theater. And from there, my students are required to design all the other community engagement activities. So this first one was about creating a headband that represents the kids' community. So these are my students testing the idea, and these are the kids building the headbands. Then we asked them to fill in the blanks. This particular project was about looking at the relationship between community and water in the desert. And we did a couple of exercises with the 4 A's. There is an ethnographic study that looks at actors, activities, atmospheres, and artifacts. And from all working with the kids and the data analysis, the biggest thing was that they all love the monsoon season. If you are not familiar with the monsoon, it's like a dust storm like you see in the movies in the desert, followed by a very strong storm. And they all love the monsoon seasons, but their parents don't allow them to play in the storm, and they have to look at it from the windows of the living room. And that kind of became, okay, then we will design a storm. But they also, from this A4 exercise, this ethnographic study, again, these are 6th graders between ages 10 and 12. They wanted a place to chill, a place to discovery, and to feel that they belong. So this notion of the monsoon became an artificial cloud that would light thunders triggered by Arduino sensors. And it developed the drops that they were all individual pieces that they were interactive, and the windows of the living room. So each particular element of this storm, we went through a series of iterations. One of the things that I noticed is that sometimes creativity is also hindered by the pressure of fabricating it. Probably the number 4 would be the closest to where the design was going that would be very successful, yet it wouldn't be able to be fabricated in 4 weeks. So we continue developing the cloud. The same happened with the notion of the window of the living room. And we also started exploring how to integrate all the drawings and the things we have been doing with the kids as part of the market, the branding of the project and the graphics of the project. So this project was in the city of Scottsdale. It's every year they do canal conversions, that they are 20 world-renowned artists that they come to town. Somehow they saw Pause and Play, that was the previous project that I showed you. and they invited us to be part of it. We have 230,000 people visited this installation over a period of 10 days. And now it's all scattered in different places in the city as permanent exhibits. You can see the cloud that is activated, the thunder, the making bubbles, and the window of the living room. One of the parameters of this type of projects is like they need to be fabricated on our shop, but they all need to fit in a U-Haul, be able to be installed in 24 hours and installed in 24 hours. So there is a lot of logistics that goes beyond how we put it together, but also how we put it together so we can transport it and put it together fast again. And these are some of the processes of challenging. So through doing this type of work, my students became innovator in their own capacity to innovate. They learn to collaborate with others in a human way. They prototype their ideas. It was human-centered, and it built a lot of resiliency. One of the first projects that I did as a design build with undergrad students in interior design, we were told that we couldn't use the shop because they were women and it would be a problem having women using power tools. So we ended building the same project in our garages and in our sidewalks, and it really ended being very well done, regardless what at the beginning everyone thought. And we really learned to collaborate and to persuade. Persuasion is very important, especially when we are working with other designers from other disciplines, and we all want to do it our way. It's much more easier to work with non-designers than with designers. But also, it taught them a lot about how we build things. This is the model of the musical bench of the first project. And it needed to deal with some design things, but when I flip it over, it was built in such a way that it wouldn't be able to be built in real life. So it was going back to this notion like, okay, now that you have the form, you need to go back and really understand how you will build this bench together. And it's all about this transformation. How do we transform communities? This is a project that we did with a Title I high school, where there are 6 million youth in America between the ages of 16 and 20 that they are neither at school nor working. And this organization recruits these students and put them back into the educational system so they can finish their high school. And we work with them in designing hope. And I was showing Tina some of the pictures. One of my students came back last week to this school, and it has the work that they have done 3 years ago, it really transformed the school until today. So my takeaways is like, very often we hear the concept of failing forward, and it's this idea that we fail and we recover to create again. We embrace collaboration. We learn from these cross-disciplinary approaches of all the different partnerships that we have built during the years. It's a transformative experience from the students, but also for the community involved. I especially love working with youth, because if we talk about improving diversity in our disciplines, there's no better way than showing what we do to kids that they haven't figured out yet what they want to become. With that said, I would like to finish this with 2 quotes. One is about writing our own stories, and the other one is one of my 6th graders from one of our projects. That was that we are all a piece of something by ourselves, but we are bigger together. And it's fascinating the things that they have to say. So with that said, thank you.
Wow. Thank you guys both for the fantastic presentations. I mean, I love the way you guys are developing these kind of new platforms for discussion. So I want to pass it off to Tina, but before I do that, I just want to encourage anyone who has any questions in the chat on YouTube or here in Zoom, feel free to send them over, and at the end of the discussion, I'll ask them. But I'll pass it off now to Tina to start the discussion part of the
Tina,
chat.
can I turn on the video so we have it in the background as we have the discussions, or would you rather prefer that I stop sharing?
No, I think that's a great idea that you should play these videos. So Milagros, thank you again. As I mentioned, I have so much to learn from you and aspire to have studios like this. So thank you again for the great presentation and showing all the work you're doing. I think we had like great discussions before as we were putting these presentations together. So one of my question is, I mean, people don't realize how much time the prep work these studios take. And I like try my best, like, in summer to try to establish partnership or find partners, or what about like, this expert into the studio, etc. How do you go about looking for these partners and get them on board? Because I think that's again a challenge which I have encountered. Yes, they're committed, I mean, I'm right now trying to establish this partnership with one of the, I won't say the name, but one of the cultural arts centers, but it's just like follow-up commitment, etc. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Every case is different. Most of the time I have partners coming and saying, Milagros, can you help? And that's without the design builds. They want the partnerships that are very similar to yours. It's more the partners coming and saying, Milagros, can you help? And I'm like, yes, what do you need? We don't know what we need, but can you help? Sure, and that's how it starts. But with the design builds, it's a little bit tricky. The first design build that was Pause and Play, that was for the Prototyping Festival of Mesa, all the design builds are grant-funded projects, right? But that first one, I wrote the grant. The grant was about prototyping, and prototyping is very top-down, like you have an idea, you show the idea, and you build it. And basically, I challenged the status quo. I think that one of the things being from Latin American is that there are rules, and then we know how to bend the rules without breaking them. It was about show me the idea, showing the drawings and what you want to do. And I proposed to prototype the process rather than the object. So when they're asking me drawings, I show the drawings of the kindergarten kids designing their treehouse. When they ask me about photos, I show the collage of the community working together. So I kind of look at the grant in a different way. And I got the grant, but I didn't have the partner. It was the first time that happened. And basically I reached out to a previous partner that was the school district of the city, and I explained them the project, and they kind of did the matchmaking for me. So that project, that was the first public event in the city, kind of triggered many other, 50,000 people came to the first Pause and Play, and then it was in the museum, and people started asking me, how can I do to do something like this? Or I want to be part of this. So then what happened was like, I have partners aligned, but then I need to go for funding. So I have to identify where I could write a grant that I could help create these partnerships with the schools that they were interested in doing. And for the grants, usually I start writing grants a year in advance. So usually I start, I do both. Sometimes I do design builds in the fall and sometimes in the spring. If I am gonna do something in the spring, let's say of 2021, I will be writing the grant in spring 2020. I will know in October if I get it or not. I will arrange everything between October and December, and in January we'll start.
No, that's great. And I'm going to ask you this question. So what challenges do you find usually with these project internal support? And I know you mentioned about the first project, which was like really a shame that the fabrication shop won't let the women in or the interior design students in.
They were concerned that they would be injured.
Oh, so sad. But then you literally opened your garage for them, as well as like, they were fabricating on the sidewalks. And I know you approached one of the graphic design firms, right? It was like a last minute call. So what are like some of the challenges you find with internal support and also with student motivation? It's like, it seems like your students are so engaged in this these projects for 8 weeks, right? And they're operating as a team, so it's not an individual venture. So what are some of the challenges you find with them?
So the internal challenge, I would say that the last 2 years I have none, because we all grew, right? The same growing pains that we were talking earlier with the sophomores and the freshmen is exactly the same thing. I think that the first times no one was used to saying, hey, we're going to do these things. There is going to be a liability for the university if someone gets injured. It's going to be a liability for the city if someone gets injured, right? There was so many liability concerns involved everywhere that I have to learn the system. At the very beginning, I mean, I was clueless when I started doing this. And again, I think that being from Latin America, we do and ask for forgiveness instead of permission. So I got the first grant, and the grantee, the grantor sent me an email and say, tell me, where do I send you a check? And I was like, no, check? Wait a minute, what check? I didn't know how to process the grant. and I didn't know that I was supposed to submit the grant through the university. I just submitted the grant. So there was a lot of things that I was trying to figure out for everyone, for the school and for me. Right now, the pipeline is super smooth in that regard, and the support is there. And so with the community, because when something that I do pretty well is to acknowledge everyone's help, like what you did in your last slide, giving thanks. And then the industry, the fabricators that they are in the community, they are like, let me know if you need help. So very often the help is offered before I have to go and seek it now. Trying to understand liability is one important thing that I always, sorry, I'm gonna go to the next one. Liability is important for the university and for the cities. So that was probably my biggest thing to learn, how to address that.
And that was my next question about, like, your students are fabricating, these things. So do you have like probably the liability waivers are associated with these grants? And
yes, we have liability waivers when we're fabricating, liability waivers when we are driving to the site, liability waivers when we are on the site installing, and when we are on the site installing. That again, the first one I didn't know. Basically, there are different forms that the university has. Like when we're installing on the site, it's a volunteer form. One of the projects that I'm doing with the sophomores, I have been doing it for the last 4 years, is a partnership with Habitat for Humanity. My sophomores in interior design, they build homes for Habitat. And that's when I realized that I was supposed to have these volunteer forms that covers the liability when it's not part of the class, but they are going with the class and with the professor.
And one thing I realized, like when I was doing the cafe for children or youth with disabilities or intellectual disabilities, is like I had to do my IRB ahead of time, and I did not, so I could not take them, like I mentioned. So I literally called that mom with her son to the studio. Right. I don't know if I broke any rules, I shouldn't be talking about it, but but this is like one lesson learned, that if you are engaging and if you want the students to be engaged, that you have to do like, all these things ahead of time. I also like, when I was like looking at a lot of teaching pedagogies, I found like IDEO has done something. Have you found any kind of like good strategy or pedagogy to teach empathy? And I know teaching empathy is a daunting task to students, so right. You fall on some kind of like, pedagogy or some model?
That's an excellent question. I have been doing teaching empathy is very well established in nursing education. In a design, to me, is still a Pandora's box. I haven't found one particular exercise that works 100% well. But to me, is when I did, for example, the project with the dreams, is empathy by proxy. We cannot really see, because of HIPAA regulations, we cannot see the students the kids that are sick. So everything happens through the life specialist, and the conversation trying to understand what these kids are going through and why they have the dreams that they have. It's all through the life specialist. And then all the other projects that we have done was more about amplifying the voices of the community. How do we design for someone else's point of view that is different from ourselves? And I think that they all express that they improve empathy. They all develop this kind of, there is a moment, because the semester is very intense and there is only 4 weeks to fabricate. And usually by the second week, they are all super exhausted. And there is the thing that they own it to their kids, to the ones that we are working with, that it kind of find the extra motivation for them to work. So somehow I think there is a commitment that is associated with the empathy that they develop by working with that particular user.
Thank you. And again, I know we're feeling like if it's community engaged, the brunt of it, like COVID. So how's like COVID impacted your community engaged projects right now?
Well, that's an excellent question. We were in the middle of building 5 design builds projects when COVID started. We started fabrication on March 1st. And they closed our shop on March 15. And the shop was closed before the events were canceled. And I was worried for a while, because there were a lot of contracts that I would say that I would spend this money and I would deliver these things that we couldn't deliver because there was no fabricated. Thank God, then they canceled absolutely everything, and it was great. We kind of have to shift the approach to the project. And in that particular case, what we did is we asked the students to develop IKEA catalogs, like a how-to step-by-step, because at the very beginning when this COVID thing started, we all thought that it would be a couple of weeks and it would be done. So my hope was that the students in the fall will complete the fabrications of the spring. So we kind of shift to communicate very well the fabrication process. And then, as I mentioned, one of the projects that I do with community engagement is with Habitat for Humanity. Every year we work with between 10 and 15 families. We interview these families, and the students are expected to provide an FFE for the entire house, because something else that I learned is like it's very easy to design with money. It's very hard to design without money. And most of these families don't have enough budget. So it's a project that is all about being very conscious about the budget. They have $2,000 for when the family move in, and then they have $500 every 6 months to complete the entire home within 4 phases. And basically, we are doing these interviews this semester. We are having our first interview in 2 weeks with the families all online. The only thing that will shift will be that the students will not be building homes. To me, I like it because every Monday they come very sore because they have been hammering drywall, and it's like, why were you hammering drywall? You were supposed to drill it. No, they don't let us, and they show you photos, and it's pretty fascinating. They have installed roof, and they have done wiring, and it's a good opportunity for them not only to give back, but to also understand what is behind the wall that they usually finish or complete.
Oh, that's interesting. I think pretty much, Brandon, if you have other questions in chat, we can take that, and then I can close with a few other thoughts and questions I have.
So we'll jump in. This is coming from Ron Daniels, who's faculty here at the School of Interior Design. And he asks both of you guys, can Tina and Milagros comment on the complexities of design leadership when kind of engaging in community collaborations? Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Or, yeah,
No,
so,
sorry.
could you?
Now I can hear you. Sorry for a second.
Sorry. My mic was a little low there. Apologies. So I'll repeat it one more time. Can Tina and Milagros comment on the complexities of design leadership when engaged in kind of community collaborations?
Do you want to go first, because you're like
I can
active.
go. I can go. I think that the one of the complexities is how our students are still learning. And when I went to school, I was educated to design. I was educated to design buildings that they would be awarded and recognized by other architects. It was never about really looking at the everyday life. And there is a civil responsibility that comes with working with communities that very often we need to educate them about that. We need to educate them that these are not helicopter projects, that we will deliver something that we think that is right for them, that it needs to be really coming from working with the community. Also, there is a lot of cultural values that we need to address. I share with Tina a couple of examples from like when one of my students was trying to invite a kid that wasn't engaged to join a group of 100 kids, and this kid was in the corner alone, and a teacher came ballistic, like, don't touch him. And he was a kid with special needs that his bubble space was much more bigger than a regular kid. So I learned through the process many times, saying, asking in advance to the teachers, is there any concern that we should know in advance? But also educating the students. There is a lot of body language that comes with working with communities. I don't know if it is a complexity or a consideration, but when the students come and they are like this and they are very tight, it's very hard for a community to trust them. So I think that a lot of the complexity is more about trying to be on board, that we are one team where everyone has an equal voice, and we are not the ones that we are the masters of the universe, that we know the solution to everything. And my biggest fear is always, please don't screw up, right? Because there is the screwing up of whatever design build is not well done, but it's also like we can be doing harm without realizing that we are doing harm. And to me, that's my biggest worry as for myself, And it's the worry that I also share with the students. I'm worried that I may screw up, but I'm worried also that my students may screw up. So it's both.
I think for me, like the challenge was that first project, which was kids with intellectual disability, and preparing the students to ask the right things to the client and be very, very sensitive what questions they pose and all the terms used, So, I mean, and that goes like, we teach studios, which is like, sections and coordinating those sections. So somebody said like, the autistic kid, and you never say that. The kid always comes first, right? The children with autism, and few things like that. And also, as you mentioned, like the bubble, right? When I invited the mother with a kid who had Down syndrome, and he actually graduated from Kent, 24-year-old, he's 5 years old, and he came. So preparing the students, like, don't act like that, like asking proper questions and training them in those sense. So I think those were some of the challenges, but I haven't encountered like a project on a scale which you have. So so the challenges are less. And even like okay, going to Chicago, like preparing them that there'll be such a transformation when we go from north side to south side, and like and people were scared, why are they coming to us, and what are they doing, because all the students were taking photographs of that building. So the locals were approaching them because the train station was right there, and I started interrogating them, like, why are you here, what work, which firm sent you, or which, like so again, preparing them like what to say and what not to say. So that's like a challenge, and that goes like more with training, and that's what I'm learning myself, and trying to like train them to basically ask the right questions and stuff.
And I would like to add, it requires a lot more time than a regular studio that is hypothetical. Planning in advance, meeting with the stakeholders, explaining the projects, follow up of the project. The project usually starts 6 months or a year before we do it in a studio. And in some of the cases, and that's something that I personally struggle, I don't know where to live, when to leave the community that I work with. So for example, the project in Little Mexico that I did in 2008, each time they need help because they're about to buy the land, because we need to explain the project to a potential donor, I am always there. And the problem is, like, as I continue teaching more studios, it was easy when I have 1 or 2 partners. But now that I have collaborated with over 50 different partners, it's very hard when to leave. And because there have been so many people in the past, there is an issue of trust with all these communities, that people come and say, oh, the university is very often, right, from the School of Education, from the School of Policy, everyone is like, I want to fix it, I want to help you, right? But then we do the semester and we leave. So building that trust is important, but following up to that trust that we develop is also very important. So the projects that I have done 10 years ago, I haven't finished them yet. Maybe I finished the deliverable, the video, the book, and everything else, but there is a commitment to continue working with them.
No, I agree. And I think that's what the beauty about these projects is, like, like Beth Humbert, with whom, like, the relationship was established, last year, we're still in touch, and she'll keep me updated. I've signed the lease for this building. This is happening next. I'm taking this idea, So I think, like, that's very, very, like, rewarding thing when the community, or like, the partners you reach out to, they become your friends, and they're just like, updating you. And then I have this another one, like, can we participate, etc. So that's really good.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic answers. I mean, obviously, that's, I think, something we don't get taught in school enough, is just how to communicate with others. We get so kind of caught up in our own archy speak, or however you want to say it. But thank you guys for those responses. So I also want to open it. This is coming from Olivia King, and this is for Milagros. Do you find that your students have a higher appreciation and understanding, or maybe excitement for the fabrication projects, or the fabrication, when the project focuses more on installation rather than classical interiors?
Yes, I think that there is a sense of pride that they have that is amazing from every single point of view. Right now, we just hired a new faculty and assistant professor from Colombia that will start doing design builds in architecture. But until this year, I was the only one doing design builds. So very often, all the other disciplines, we are a school that has 5 disciplines, would look at the students who were fabricated with a little bit of jealousy that, wow, you have the opportunity to build this at full scale. And there was that sense of pride, but also it was, it's fascinating when we did, last year we did a design build that has 7 different installations with 36 students. And I remember being in the museum and one of the parents came crying of my students and say, before you, she used to call me to put a screw in her wall. And now she doesn't need me anymore. So there is this kind of independency that they discover in every single aspect that I think that is super important. Yet not everything is roses. It's much more demanding than a regular studio. And I found out that they are looking forward, most of them are looking forward to do it.
Fantastic. And then this one's coming from Bill Willoughby, who's faculty here. And he's asking, it is clear to me that community engagement makes perfect sense in design education. Can you express both how educating the client comes into play as a part of design education pedagogy? Is there an outcome of community engagement that might advance the role of design thinking and awareness among non-designers and youth in the community?
Tina, would you like to go first?
You can go ahead.
So that's an excellent question. I think that yes, the challenge that sometimes I have when they are if they are not design builds, I think that we can educate the public and basically don't have any preconceived expectations until we really go through the design, the community engagement and the design process. And at the very beginning, they don't know what they need to say. It's almost like they feel that the answers need to be maybe not the honest, but the one that is going to make them look the smarter, or the one that is going to make them look successful, other than what's really the problem in the community. So what we did was trying at the very beginning, this first thing that happens through play, it helps us build trust to a whole different level. They are not coming feeling that they are being evaluated, or they are trying to have the right answer for us to do something. And that allows them to relax. And that's how we started collecting. During the play, we have the first data collection, but they don't realize that we are collecting data. So when we go the second time, we said, oh, when we were here last week, we heard that this was happening, or we heard that you mentioned this. Can you develop that idea? And because usually there will be things that they wouldn't happen otherwise. With design builds, I struggle a little bit more, because at the end of the day, there needs to be a project deliverable. So how do you engage the community without kind of any preconceived expectation when I have an expectation that something needs to be built and shown, right? So there is a little bit of pressure in the fast speed that this needs to happen.
So for me, my experience are different because that pressure is not there, but there's always, when I approach them, when Beth Humbert approached, she actually wanted architecture and didn't want anything to do with interiors, and Bill passed this, is anybody interested? I volunteered. Or when I invited from Northeast Collation, their director, to talk to the students and eventually see their work, there is this skepticism that what will interiors do, because there's this still notion that we cannot do it, So I think part of it is when students start engaging, when they realize that this is the client, and absorb into the client and asking the right questions, and when they start framing the clients or the community's problem, that this is what we listen to you actively, and this is what you were saying, and then when they start producing design, I think that's that moment of the community itself realize that what these spaces can be and how it can be transformed through interiors, through through design. So I think it becomes a very reciprocal kind of a thing. In my humble view, is yes, we are engaging the community, and that when the community approaches us, they don't know what's going to happen, right? Because this is the project and that's about it. And once the design is shown, I think they're always they start believing in the interiors and how spaces can be transformed through that. So that's my response to it.
And then I actually have a last question for you guys, because I think one of the things you guys both do, which is super exciting, is that not only do you guys develop kind of places, but you guys also develop platforms for us to have these conversations, and you guys are really actively building these. And I think in a time when um, our platforms have become overly stretched, right? We kind of either deal with each other in our own homes, and that may be our kind of main form of platform communication, the people we live with. But the other option is Zoom or Facebook. And I think both of you guys' work kind of exists between those two platforms. And I'm curious if you guys can both speculate for us. What do you guys see as that kind of next platform for us as an in-between stage, right? So that when we're going crazy at home or when we're tired of talking on Zoom, how do we build that next stage for kind of communication?
What a great question. Communication with the community, with our students, with everyone.
Yeah, I guess with students or the community, I think both of them are kind of at least questions I have, right? As we're kind of in Zoom or at home, what's the in between for us next?
Right. So
as a community, I guess.
To me, one of the things that I am trying to wrap my head around is engagement, right? I learned how to engage the community. Sometimes it's very hard how to engage the students when everything happens virtually, right? And you show up in Zoom and they are like this and kind of not wanting to be there,
Yeah.
but you're asking them to turn on their cameras. I use Menti a lot, and I use Menti because it allows every class starts with a Menti question or two. I discovered that they like Menti because it's anonymous, and we can find shared goals with the answers. So it's we kind of build the conversation, the same thing, right? Like, how are you feeling today? Bored, hungry, and then you see that hungry start to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it's like, oh, there is more than one that haven't. What's going on? And then we always start with something that is silly, but as a way to connect to one another. I was sharing at the very beginning, my husband's PhD is in artificial intelligence. And very often I argue that we are losing our humanity, right? Our way to really empathize and understand the other human being. And I think that it's very important to connect at an emotional level, especially in a discipline that is so creative, that we cannot just be robots doing this thing as a system, right? As a process. It should have this layer of humanity when we are designing. So I use Menti. I also came across a new platform that is called Our Town. I don't know if you're familiar with it. There's like a big, the screen is a room with a lot of tables and chairs. And when you move, and everyone sits in a table with a chair, right? And when you move your mouse, you listen to the conversation of this table. But if you start going away from the mouse, from that table, and you go to another table, you stop listening that conversation and you start listening the other conversation. So it's a way to feel closer to studio modality than the Zoom that is one directional all the time. But yet you are talking to an analog person. I only have Facebook because I grew up in a place that doesn't exist anymore. So I rebuilt my childhood virtually, but I don't have Twitter, I don't have Instagram. You want to be my friend, knock the door and I will feed you. So I'm an old school.
So, Brandon, that's a great question, and I'm trying my best. I don't know, and I'm literally struggling with that in between space, what that will be, And I would say is like with this community projects, it's becoming challenging a lot, that how do we connect? I mean, it's there, we get that, like, I mean, they're still engaged, with Zoom, but I don't think so. Like, I can see that I mean, my students are doing amazingly well. I'll give them all the credit for this project and how they're pulling it all together. That's really, really great. But still, that engagement was like, really missing what we had last year by really going and experiencing the space. And I'm doing like, I learned something, Our Town and Mentees, you said, which is new, and I'll explore that. I started doing something really silly with my, IDP class, which I, teach to connect with the studio. So I'll have a silly attendance question, which is like, what's your favorite topping for the pizza, favorite flavor of ice creams? At least like, on some other level, we like start relating to each other and connect. And then, and then I started like, I played like a silly song, which I like. And then I'm like, which song would you like to, hear? So I created a playlist. So if they arrive 5 minutes before, now I'm playing that, like, most of them like Halloween song, so played that and, few other things. So I think these are like small things and sometimes we overlook them, but like, the impact they make, these things that we still human. We're still able to connect to each other. We can still talk, still have conversations. So I'm trying to do the things like that. And I'm still like trying to discover what else can I do, for them.
Yeah, thank you guys for both
Thank you.
answering that. And I think it's
Thank you.
also funny that Milagros, that you say that in the town hall there's just a chair and a mouse, so it kind of reminds me of your lecture as well. So as we kind of begin to wrap things up, I want to hand it over to Director Bernal and Tina as well to kind of closing statements and a few things. And thank you guys so much for the fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Milagros, and thank you, Tina. That was really, really good to see the work that both of you are working on the areas in which you actually overlap a lot. I just want to thank the audience here, and I'll pass it on to the Mr. to see if he has some closing remarks, and Tina as well.
Thank you both. Extraordinary work. It's so important that we do learn how to engage with the humanity of our clients and can empathize with them. And I think it's a critical question of how we not just do it, but critically think about it and think about what we're doing and how we take from it, but also give back to it. So thank you for what you've done. Your examples are extraordinary. I am so have so much admiration for how you pull it off. I think the logistics are very difficult. It's difficult for a professor to do it, and I appreciated your comments on, the learning curve. I don't think that was your term, Milagros, but how long it took you to get to where you are now, and maybe it's coasting right now. You have a system, but I would encourage any professors who are going to work on community engagement that it's going to take some time, to develop the logistics, the tools, the finances, the methods, the contacts to do it really well. And you've shown us how you do it. So thank you for that, Tina, for pulling together. Your work also is extraordinary. So thank you, everybody. Great event.
Thank you again. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Mark, for this platform. And Milagros, thank you. You'll always be my hero, and I'll keep looking at your work and your students' work. So what an inspiration. So thank you.
Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity. And I really enjoy the work of your students. I already told you this 10,000 times. So students, great job.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, with that, guys, we'll wrap this up. That was another great Faculty and Friends. Just a reminder, we have the Shadowski Fellow from last year's presentation on Monday, so make sure you guys tune in for that. And we will see you guys again next week. Until then, toodaloos. Thanks again, Milagros, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.